Hello and greetings, my friend, to once again another episode here of the Red Delta Project YouTube channel. I'm Matt Schifferly with another video to help the whole world get stronger with the power of calisthenics training. And today's topic is answering a bit of a question I get sometimes. When it comes to unilateral training, is it better to do everything on one side at a time? Or are there advantages to using more of an alternated approach? When it comes to either suspension calisthenics or regular progressive calisthenics, you're only going to get so far as resistance with bilateral training, both limbs doing the same thing. And that's perfectly fine. However, if you want to access the higher levels of resistance and muscle building potential, unilateral training is gonna have to become more of a staple for you at some point in your training career. When we are primarily using one limb for a set, you're keeping the resistance on those muscles continuously or semi-continuously, because the resistance, of course, changes during the range of motion. But when you are alternating back and forth, the resistance is off, on, and so you're allowing the muscle to kind of rest a little bit in between each rep, which may give you advantages or disadvantages depending on what you're after. Allow me to make the argument that alternating back and forth may be the way to go in most cases for those who want to build muscle and strength for several reasons. The first of which is that it's only one set, which helps us kind of regulate time and energy resources a bit. So if I'm doing like archer push-ups and I get 12 repetitions on one side, then I might feel a little bit tired, fatigued, a little out of breath. And then when I go right to the other side, that side may be compromised a bit because of the systematic fatigue. So I've got to stop and rest and compose myself before I can adequately work that left side. But when you're alternating, you're working both sides in a much more even way, and it's one set, even though you're still working both sides in the unilateral fashion. And I know what you may be thinking. It's like, well, if a muscle is kind of resting a little bit in between each repetition, doesn't that mean it's going to be more challenging in order to adequately fatigue the muscle, especially if we're trying to work for hypertrophy? So I could do, say, 10 presses like this, but I could be all day here when I'm alternating because I'm giving the muscles a chance to rest a little bit. But for that, we can look at it in a different way of saying, well, yeah, you do get to rest a bit more, which means you can work with a heavier level of resistance, therefore helping to promote more tension in the muscle, aka strength. Because when we have more resistance, we generate more tension, which creates faster fatigue. So now I can work with a higher level of resistance, and because the fatigue is lasting a little longer and I'm fatiguing it faster, that means I'm still going to achieve the same level of fatigue in the muscle, stimulating the same level of hypertrophy, theoretically. But now I can work even harder and heavier than before to potentially get the best of both strength and hypertrophy stimuli. Not to mention the fact that unilateral alternating training may be a little on that functional spectrum a little bit, because especially for things like the legs, we use our legs unilaterally in an alternating fashion most of the time when we're using them. So this can help build up some of that stability, control, and coordination that then may have more carryover into real life application. Boy, I'm feeling those sissy squats from earlier. But so we've got this back and forth, we've got to adjust, we've got to stabilize, and it helps to be a little bit more aware of differences too. If we've got a solid feeling right limb exercise, but then our left feels wobbly and wonky, that's giving our nervous system the ability to say, this is strong, do it like this, and then switch over and get that stimulus to carry over. So that way we're not doing one side wonky and one side strong all the time. So my vote generally goes for, if you have a unilateral exercise, you may be better off alternating back and forth. Although, if you have a preference of keeping it to one side, that's certainly reason enough to still do it just that way. Because ultimately, this is one of those factors when it comes to workout programming that probably does have some influence over the outcome, but it's probably not enough to really worry about it being one way or the other. So in that case, of course, you base things off of just personal preference of what do you like to do, what do you feel better doing, what do you have more control over, what helps you create the stimulus that you're after, and then basing your choice off that rather than what someone else on YouTube supposedly thinks is best. Plus, some exercises, it may not be the most practical and worthwhile thing to keep changing back and forth. Like if I'm doing a classic step up here, it's kind of awkward to have to move over in between each one. And that's not even to say that you can't even mix the two. So you can do something like 3 to 5 reps on one side of a unilateral exercise, and then you get like 5 or 3 or whatever on the other before switching it back and forth. So you could go with a bit of a hybrid model, which gives you a kind of a best of both worlds sort of deal. So like so many things when it comes to diet and exercise, it's probably not really that important, and it probably doesn't matter one way or the other unless it matters to you. So experiment, play with it. You may find it suits you more for some exercises than for others to alternate or stick with one side. Again, if the equipment or the style of training lends itself better for one or the other, but don't feel like there's one best way to do it. But again, I have to kind of say that the alternated version's certainly been my preference over the past several months of my own training and those with clients. But love to hear your thoughts down below. Check out more videos here. If you have further questions, especially my micro workouts that can work really well for this kind of exercise as well. And I'll talk to you in the next video. Be fit and live free.